Listened to your podcast last week, the industry seating one, encourage the fans to listen to that. You had some really good points you touched on, and I guess aside from the silly season stuff, which we'll get into later, it was really cool to hear your thoughts on Sexton and the way his mindset must be, and sort of an insight into the races and the way they approach their career. They have all the money in the world right now, but they just want to win really badly. And I guess him having Jet, must be so tough because he was probably penciling himself in for many titles, Sexton, then having to sort of shift the focus and, from being destined to dominate to being frustrated a little bit with the bike, with how Jet's racing and not being able to get the wins he probably thought he would have. So I guess he'll be hard at work in the off season and wanting to get as many areas improved as he can with the starts initially, I'd imagine. So how do you sort of see Sexton heading in?
Yeah, it's one of those situations where he has some things to work on. I think first and foremost, the one that sticks out are the starts. He is not head and shoulders faster than everybody where the starts won't matter. You could argue he's not even the fastest guy. He lost that little bit of edge that he had on sprint speed, I think, switching to the KTM, and maybe that comes back with another year of comfort level and testing and just being more familiar in his confines. But for him, like we had done a bunch of data collection, and his starts were a big problem, right? His starting position took a serious turn for the worse in 2024. And if you're going to give Jet and Cooper Webb and now Hunter and the return of Eli Tomac and whoever else, you're going to spot those guys' positions on the first lap. Good luck, right? Like, you may be able to overcome it several times throughout the season, but the law of averages over 17 rounds is going to catch up with you. You're not going to be able to just slice through the pack week in, week out. And there are going to be times when Jet gets to start and is just gone. You never see him. You never even have a chance to race with him. So to me, I don't have the answer. I think that they need to work on his reaction time. They need to work on the clutch disengagement. They need to work on torque off the starting line. They need to work on the ECU mapping, like all those things. I might be wrong, right? But those are the things that I would be looking at as far as where are we missing it? Is it the fuel mapping going from the grate, the grid behind the start to going over the start and then hitting the dirt? I've heard that being theorized as far as how Honda has that progression built in is a huge advantage. Or is it just like they changed the engine package for Las Vegas and they felt like that was a step forward. It turned out it didn't really do much at all, right? Like, there was no improvement whatsoever. In the practice starts we saw, or in the first moto, right when he got hurt, we didn't see any improvement at all. I also think that Chase's reaction time has not been stellar, but we've seen him get hole shots before, so that those two things are hard to square. Oftentimes you'll see riders who get bad starts. A lot of it is their reaction time slow, their technique is not great, but we've seen Chase on a Honda put that equation together on a consistent basis. So I tend to think that it's either Chase losing confidence in himself on the starts, and that's being compounded by challenges from the motorcycle. But something is going on there. And then I would even further that by saying, Plessinger has gotten pretty good starts this year. So how do they square those two things? Like, AP's kind of figured it out, and what is Chase not doing that AP is doing, right? So AP, I think, could look at the bike and say, the bike's not as good as the Honda. I'm not getting as good at starts. And then Red Bull KTM can push back and say, well, look at AP. AP's up front most of the time right now. Maybe not hole shotting, but he's like top 5 most of the time. So his bike's doing it. Why are you not doing it? That's a really tough one. I can understand why there's a lot of frustration on both sides there. But the simple fact is, if they don't figure it out, it's going to be incredibly hard for Chase Sexton to win a Supercross championship next year.
Yeah, you got to get everything dialed well set, and there's obviously those fine margins. And it's an interesting one with the KTM. You obviously see AP dialing the starts, and Sexton hasn't. Vial's not what he used to be. Hurlings has had massive issues, so they definitely obviously got some things to work on and think about in the off season. And I guess like we saw at SMX, if you don't get those starts, like the Lawrence brothers, even Tomac, they put themselves in really good positions for success. You can have those situations like he did where Barsha landed on him, and that just elevates if you keep getting terrible sort of jumps out of the gate, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the further you are in the pack, the more traffic you're in. Just the law of averages, you're going to run into more issues. The safest place is at the very front. And you look at the crash with Barsha. things like that are just more prone to happen in traffic. Like that's just the simple fact of it. And, I'm sure it's just one more reason, I would say that Sexton's not looking at that as being like, I gotta get away from traffic. I don't think he's looking at that. I think he's looking at my first lap positioning. I'm getting killed here because I'm not up front and those guys are checking out before I can even kind of figure out what's going on. And every single time that I have a good result, I'm having to come from the back. That's probably what he's looking at. But yes, to your point, the traffic and likelihood for crashes and injuries and those things is absolutely a part of it.